Okay, hello and welcome. My name is Jennifer Cassinson. I'm the Vice President of Ambassador and Industry Partner Programs at BuildExact. And we are incredibly honored today to have Aaron Smith with us, who's the CEO of the Energy and Environmental Building Alliance, which most of you affectionately know as EEBA. So, or do you guys say EEBA? Is it
I say EEBA, but
you say EEBA?
we'll
I've
take
said
it.
that. So yeah, let's say EEBA. So he's here from EEBA, and he has decades of experience in the housing market. He's been with names such as Kohler and Uponor, and has his own building company. Right now at EEBA, he has more than 300 educational courses, and they are serving 50,000 builders. So a lot of content and knowledge out there. And today he's going to share some of that with us. And he really wants us to be active participants in the conversation. So please enter your thoughts, ideas, questions, comments in the chat, and we'll slow him down in between slides and get those asked and answered. But today he's going to be talking about the top 10 ways to tap the value of green building. And with that, Aaron, I pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And it's an honor to be here with BuildExact and with your audience. And, just a little bit more about EEBA, but just a great place that we bring builders and our partners together to learn, share, and collaborate. We believe that better homes help us with a better future. So with that, I'll dive right in. At EEBA, one of our core beliefs is that we're all on a pathway to zero, hopefully. And that pathway kind of leads through, obviously, code minimum to high performance building to perhaps zero energy ready buildings. And then it starts to go to zero net energy buildings, zero energy all electric, and zero carbon. And I think wherever you are on the journey, it's a big tent. We're all just trying to get better. We're all trying to learn from each other. We're all trying to share as much what works as what doesn't work. But I think that's the goal for most of us. And sometimes I define it as, I think at the high end, we're trying to build healthier homes. I think we're looking at electrification where it makes sense. We're striving toward resiliency. We're working on decarbonization, both embodied and operational decarbonization. And, it sounds funny, but I'll say net zero today is actually pretty easy in the grand scheme of things. So we'll dive into more about that. But why are we doing this? I mean, there's a lot of debate about ESG and different things, but I say it's for our consumer. A lot of the research that we've done, and this is through EcoPulse and Shelton Group, who's a great partner of EEBA, 42% want to be seen as someone who buys eco-friendly products. And 72% believe that their house has a moderate to strong impact on their health. 51% of consumers said it was important to upgrade the air ventilation systems in their home. These consumers are not just buying because the homes are high performance, but high performance is a key piece of the value proposition that builders need to deliver on. So we're seeing a new kind of conspicuous consumption. And Jennifer, I think, knows, like, I have the F-150 Lightning, and I have a Mustang Mach-E, and I have solar panels on my house, and I've got a heat pump and a heat pump dryer and a heat pump water heater. And, you're starting to do these things that are maybe sharing your values, but a lot of the younger consumers, this is where they want to go. So it's important that we understand kind of the mechanisms to get there. And Jennifer, I'll take a little break. I don't know if you have any questions have come up.
Yeah, so what I was saying in the chat was that, man, that you just went through a laundry list of things for a builder or an architect to consider. That's a lot. So I'm kind of curious as to what's the most challenging, what's the most difficult thing to fit together in that massive puzzle of things that a builder has to think about?
Yeah, I think it's that just I love, and maybe I'm a little bit of a geek, but I love going to those, what's like generation reports. How does each generation think? And if we were at a big company like Colgate or Mars, or we would know that. We know what millennials want. We know what Gen Y wants. We know what the Zoomers want. The millennials and Gen Y represent the biggest buyers of houses. I think they've already overtaken it today, and they will continue to take it. I'm Gen X. There's less of us. There's a lot more of them. So very important to understand, who are we designing these houses for? What does our future consumer either look like now, or they're going to look like shortly? And they are eco-conscious consumers. Their conspicuous consumption is much different. They want to be out in the environment, maybe by trails, parks, and good school districts. Zoom towns and the great reshuffling have really changed the landscape of where these people want to live. So yes, it's challenging, but I think there's a good pull here for that. Whether we want to do it or not, it may be great options for our consumers, particularly around the indoor air quality side. Like 51% of them are, if you're not offering them, hey, you want an ERV in your house. And by the way, I'll say, thou shalt put an ERV in your house. You're perhaps not offering them upgrades that they would take. So hopefully that helps, Jennifer. So I want to share with you next just a little bit of data about the growth in net zero homes across the United States and Canada. This is a report we put together, and we call this the geography of zero. This is ranked by top 20 cities across North America and the top 20 states across North America. And I think it's interesting, I think there's some we all say, oh, it's California, New York, Colorado. Here's Arizona in the top 5, Florida, number 6, Mass, number 7, Ontario, number 8, Pennsylvania, number 9, Oregon, number 10. So we're seeing this spread out to more states and provinces. In our report, multifamily versus single family, we actually saw 440% growth over the last 2 years in single family homes going to net zero, which is an incredible amount of growth. So on total units of net zero, now this would include multifamily and single family, we saw 190% growth of getting to net zero. Here's some of the top builders by units and architects by projects. So you'll see the architects listed on the left-hand side. You'll see the builders listed on the right-hand side. And I just want to point out, 5 Point is a developer out of California. They're that project you saw with 21,500 net zero homes planned. But in that development, we see Lennar, KB Home, Toll Brothers, Richmond American, and Tri Point Homes. Jevon Investments, Planet Green Energy, Mandalay, Sifton, Corporation for Better House. I mean, lots and lots of great builders from across the country that are doing net zero today. But those are some of the tops. And I really like this one, Jennifer. In 2015, in our report, most of the houses were zero energy ready. So they were prepped for the potential to add battery or add solar, but they didn't go farther than that. And that represented about 85% of the marketplace. If we fast forward to today, zero energy ready is 33% of the market. Zero energy, which would be net zero, the building creates as much energy as it uses over the course of a year. That represents 51% of the market. And net positive, which means I have a restorative, regenerative home that I've built that is exporting energy back to the grid over a course of a year, now represents over 16%. So we're seeing this huge shift to net zero and net positive over the past 7 years. Jennifer.
Yeah, so this is fascinating. So what do you think is the opportunity to get back into these zero energy ready homes with the IRA incentives and make them, convert them all the way? On
the zero energy ready home?
Yes.
Yeah. I tell people it's an oversimplification, but depending what state you live in, solar's free for your house. You're trading a expense of paying for electricity for a write-off cost of buying your own power generation system for your home. I think the number one opportunity there is to look at solar. I also think if we have some roofers on the call, I was incredibly impressed by the new solar shingles. I mean, we're seeing solar shingles come out from both Certainteed, which are already currently in the market, and now GAF's Energy Group, which has a solar shingle. The ability to retrofit solar, to not worry about architectural or historic committee, have it be flush to the roof, I think is a game changer for people adapting solar. Even me being an early adopter, Jennifer, I was really concerned about raised panel solar on my roof. Mine ended up looking great, but I think solar, battery adoption, I think overall electrification then to take advantage of those systems within the house are where the real opportunities are within the Inflation Reduction Act. And we'll dive into more of that in just a bit.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Okay. And then I probably should have switched to this one, Jennifer, but what are some of those top residential high performance technologies that we're seeing? All electric, solar PV systems, battery systems, and electric vehicle chargers. I think those are some of the technologies we'll see go in. I also want to point out, it's not all cost. This is a study from, I believe this was out of the Washington Post, but it was on Texas. And they did a long-term study. The increase in value of relatively newer homes sold in Texas of going green or high performance was on average $24,560. So there is a real green premium to this. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the total cost of ownership. I don't have a utility bill at my house. Many of our builders with EEBA have homes for their customers where their utility bills are $30, $40, $50 a month. That is still, there's a big struggle, Jennifer, in the United States and Canada right now about affordable housing. If you can take utilities out of that house, how much more affordable is it for that family? But there is a true green premium that's there. So there's two parts I'll talk about here. One is the carrot and one is the stick, but first we'll talk about the stick. So these are the net zero codes across North America. All these states and municipalities that are looking at some sort of, it could be a net zero carbon stretch code, it could be zero net energy zoning regulations, it could be elimination of natural gas and propane within their jurisdictions. But there is a lot of movement to net zero codes across the United States and Canada. So that's the stick part of it. And back to your question, Jennifer, or the audience's question, the Inflation Reduction Act, or as it used to be known, the 45L tax credit, I think is a real game changer. It's going to give money to both the builder and to the homeowner for deploying some of these technologies. So it's a new energy efficient home tax credit for single family home builders and multifamily developers. It also applies to deep retrofits of an existing property. So huge opportunity there. The applicability to new construction, it applies to new construction or deep retrofits. And, there's still some interpretation. So it looks like it can be braided or combined with the HERA or 25C, which is a homeowner credit that's separate. But for the builders, for the trades that are out there, the tax credits for dwelling units that are eligible to participate in the Energy Star Residential New Construction Program or the Energy Star Manufactured New Home Program will receive a $2,500 rebate to the builder per unit. And they will receive $5,000 if it meets the requirements of the Zero Energy Ready Home Program. So that shift we saw earlier of 440% increase in single family homes. I think this is the biggest point in time where this is set with the US Congress for the next 10 years. The ability to become an Energy Star level builder, which is not difficult in my opinion, you can receive $2,500 back per home. And then to do Indoor Air Plus and then move on to Zero Energy Ready Home program and potentially have a $5,000 per home rebate, I think it's a really nice offset. And then with this HERA credit, your homeowner, depending where they are on the average median income in your community, they could receive maybe from $4,000 credit to $14,000 credit for putting in a heat pump, putting in a heat pump water heater, putting in a heat pump dryer, putting in an electric range, putting in an electric fireplace, wiring for an electric vehicle. And a nice thing too, when I did my solar, Jennifer, I got a 26% rebate. That solar rebate is now 30% and it's locked in for 10 years at 30%. There's also a great credit for geo or ground source based systems, where if it's made in the United States, you can receive a 40% rebate for bringing the efficiency of that house up considerably. Question?
Yeah, so there's a question in the chat. What about designers and architects? Are there rebates available for design professionals?
There are not that I'm aware of today. But I think if you're a design professional, if you're an architect and you're going through with your consumer, I think you're going to have one of the biggest influences of making these decisions with them and being aware of the rebates that you can potentially save your client up to $14,000 per residence that they build is really significant and may really add to the value that all of us can bring to our customers. So great to be aware of. No direct rebates I'm aware of, but of course, if you're an architect or designer, you can receive these rebates for your own house. If you need to upgrade and we're seeing 200 amp systems now, Jennifer, are very common in new houses. There's a rebate there for you to upgrade your house or upgrade your wiring or add solar or add a heat pump water heater, whatever it might be. Okay, so that's a little bit, and just to bring it back, I kind of look at this path to zero is code minimum is the worst house you can build by law. That's unacceptable today. You better be on a path to net zero. If you don't have a plan to get to net zero within the next 3 to 5 years, I think you're wrong and you're going to get left behind because the consumers are going to demand it. Some of the government state rating systems are going to demand it. And you really should start thinking about carbon. So let's take that to kind of what EEBA is doing about it on bringing sustainability home. But sorry, my clicker is just a little bit slow, so I have some delay in here. So I think our belief, as I mentioned before, is that we need to be thoughtful in the health impacts of the home. Is there an opportunity to go all electric? Could it be rewarded with lower utility bills and perhaps inflation reduction credit? I like health and resiliency because I think they're kind of at the top of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs for homeowners. That if we're not making the house healthy and resilient, we're forgetting that there's people in it. Electrification isn't an end all be all. I hate to say it, but carbon's not an end all be all. It's helpful. We've got to make these places healthy and more resilient for homeowners. And then again, I think that net zero is actually pretty simple today on a new home construction. Even on a remodel, you can always overwhelm it with solar and become net zero. So a lot of these topics I've talked about, if you want to get more information, we've got 250, almost 300 hours of online education and kind of an ability to learn, share, and collaborate with some of the best. We have a training course called Zero Energy Building Professional. We just came out with a new one called Net Zero Carbon Building Professional to really dive in. How do I look at operational carbon? How do I look at embodied carbon? How do I make thoughtful choices in that? We'd love if you could join us. We've got a special rate right now for the EEBA High Performance Home Summit, October 10th through 12th in Salt Lake City. And it's only $695. I think that I know several of the people I see on the call right now will be there. And of course, I'll be there and it'll be great. So that's kind of a good stopping point. Jennifer, I don't know if you want to open it up for questions.
I do want to open it up for questions, and I have another question. So, what is the manufacturer's role in this? I mean, you were saying specifically, it's doing this is dependent on having multiple different products in place. With that being said, where and how do manufacturers come into play? And you even mentioned too, locally sourced. So, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on manufacturers, but how can you as a builder create a relationship with them or collaborate with them in order to achieve these goals?
It's such a great question, Jennifer. And I think that technology is changing so quickly. And unfortunately, we live in a world where we're not building a heck of a lot different than my grandfather built.
Mm-hmm.
And the industry could come up with the greatest technology, the greatest new technology, and it will take the building industry 20 years to adopt it. Proven fact. Having more of a direct line of sight or relationship with manufacturers, I think, is extremely important to builders. I was kind of talking about this, that we were using a Schneider Electric product that's really designed as a 200 amp load system that's really integrated for generator, for battery, for solar. Everything's integrated. There's an automatic shut off in the system. But when I went to my electrician and my distributor, they weren't aware of that product. So I think I think part of it is manufacturers building direct relationships with builders and architects and engaging with us at, through Build Exact or through EEBA. So we know about these products and we can pull them forward into the market and deploy them. I think the other part is manufacturers have an ability to train. They have great installation networks, and it's really training them on the new technology. I mean, one of the things we struggle with is, if you want to do a heat pump, it's 350, 400% more efficient than the best condensing gas furnace you can get. But it's difficult to find installers that are up to date and trained on heat pumps. It's difficult to find an installer that can do ground source. And then maybe the final piece that I think is interesting, there's a piece in the Inflation Reduction Act that's the Defense Production Act. So they have literally said most of your great heat pumps are made in Asia, and they've been doing them for a long, long period of time. The Defense Production Act, I forget how many billions of dollars, Jennifer, it's offering, but they want to bring that manufacturing to the United States. They want to bring it back here. I think that's why we see the 40% rebate for US made ground source heat pumps. We're seeing that on EV cars now, right? That if it's made in the United States, if it's made by prevailing wage labor, you're going to get additional discounts. It's kind of part of that reshoring thing. So I think you'll see some big heat pump manufacturers that will start to bring that manufacturing back to the United States. That'll be expanded. You'll see additional training to the installer groups. And you'll see, I think, closer connection between high performance builders or those that are interested and the manufacturers, so you can understand great technology and perhaps be able to deploy it into new homes or remodels that you're working on today. You're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, perfect. So the next question that's in the chat, do these tax credits also apply to commercial projects?
They do. There's, I'm not an expert on commercial by any measure, but there's always been, on the residential side, there was something called the 45L as in Lima tax credit. And that was used very successfully residentially and now has been expanded on. On the commercial side, there was a 179D as in Delta tax credit. And that, I believe, has also been expanded on by the Inflation Reduction Act. So many of the same rebates or tax write-offs or ability, like solar is the easiest one to think about, Jennifer. Like the solar rebate, you want to do 30% on your business or 30% on your home. It works either way. I think heat pump, some of those technologies can work on either side, but check your 179D. And then if you're not familiar, there's a website called DesireUSA.org that will list by your zip code any of the Inflation Reduction Act credits, any of the local state, any of the local municipality, any of the local utility rebates that you're entitled to. I mean, we just did a super energy efficient building, and I think we got, by doing Zero Energy Ready, we got an additional $22,000 in rebates. And then remember, multifamily is kind of in between, right? There's a $5,000 rebate for every multifamily you build to Zero Energy Ready Home program. Although the caveat is it has to be built with prevailing wage labor.
Yeah.
And there's still the jury's still out on that, Jennifer, because they're not sure what that means in rural, because you might not be able to use union in rural. So there may be a ruling that comes back that says it has to be 100% of the AMI for that county, or it's still out a little bit. And if you don't use prevailing wage, you only get, I think, $500 instead of $5,000.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It's a huge delta. It's a huge delta.
So we get a thank you. I did put the URL in the chat for the DesireUSA.org. So thank you for sharing that. That's good. So in terms of the way that builders can move forward, making themselves smarter, like I said at the beginning of the call, you guys have hundreds of courses. Is there like a course structure where they could go and get started and then follow a path through, what's the right number of courses, or what is the path that they should follow?
Yeah, I think that, if you had interest in more data on the Inflation Reduction Act, we would have a course that we've done with Department of Energy around that, and we'll continue to have those. If you had a question about battery, deploying batteries, or looking at solar, or doing heat pumps, we would have some course language there. But I think kind of the education journey, we've got a course called HERS Associate. So HERS is the rating system many of us have used. HERS is kind of how we're judged on how well our house does. But that HERS Associate gives a really great, it's a 5-part course, I believe, maybe 6. Really great basics of building science. We're going to build tight and ventilate right. We're going to make sure our windows are correct. That goes into a site supervisor course. So if you have a project manager, they need to learn more about what are the 10 things I really need to look at on a job site if I'm trying to build a net zero home. That can be a great course. Then we've got a high performance builder course, which really goes more deeply into high performance mechanicals, high performance construction. That then graduates to a net zero builder course. And then I think the graduation on top of that, kind of like the pathway to zero, is the net zero carbon building professional. So you could start off very simply, learn about building science, kind of walk through those designations, and come out pretty smart about some things. And then I think you can go around and take topics, Jennifer, where it's like, wow, I really want to learn more about air source heat pump, or I want to learn more about a heat pump water heater and how I could deploy that for my customers within my homes. And then truth be told, there's probably a lot of people on this call, but I always test stuff. Like my house is test central, right? So my wife would really like a new kitchen, and I keep testing new products on my own house.
Yeah, that's smart. If you can do that, that's super smart. You need to just keep feeding us the information, what you learn there in your house, Aaron. We'd love it. So one of the things that I feel like is has new and changing dynamics is financing for projects. how builders are looking at and aligning maybe ESG goals with the financing that they're looking for in order to build.
Yeah, it's a huge, I think I talked a lot about the consumer shifting. Depending on what size of builder developer you are, you're going to see some of the financing start to demand ESG. And just a quick story, a good friend down in Texas, he builds like 1,000 homes a year. He's kind of doing the build to rent market. And his main investor called him up and they said, 20% of your homes next year need to be net zero. Because we need 20% of our portfolio to have an ESG component to it. And some of the investors are wanting to future-proof that. So I think from the investor side, you're seeing more around ESG. In the market, you're seeing this powerful build to rent strategy where when you build to rent, you're holding that, you might hold that portfolio for 3 years or 5 years or 10 or 20. You care more about it and you care more about the operations, operational expense of that house, and you may have some sustainability goals with it. On the flip side, we just did 2 great courses on EEBA about green appraisals and appraisal value of low HERS scores houses. And where they were saying, I think the average that we saw, Jennifer, was an 11% increase in appraisal value of a low HERS score home. So I think it becomes very powerful when it ends up on the banking side of the equation. There's also some great PACE financing. It depends what state you live in if PACE works, but it works well here in Minnesota. We actually have a low carbon PACE program now, Property Assessed Clean Energy. And they'll actually, if you follow their guidelines, you can earn like a 0.5 point, 3/4 point, 1 point deduction on your mortgage. So I think the money's aligning on the one side, the consumers are aligning and demanding it on the other. And here we are in the middle, hopefully not doing the same thing that our grandfathers or whoever all did. We've got to learn some new things right now, right? We've got to adopt some new technologies. We've got to take advantage of this.
Yeah, so a couple more, one comment and one question in the chat. So someone said we're having trouble with appraisals, comps, and financing. So it sounds like just what you're talking about. It's a pretty complicated maze. And I think that it's shifting pretty rapidly, even with, let's say, Biden's veto yesterday. So that's something that I think we all could be a little bit smarter about. And hopefully, as we are tracking through that, we can share information. But then Andrew asks, are you noticing more demand for multifamily residential projects demanding or wanting net zero? It seems a lot of the projects around us get it built and then sell it, losing on the potential net zero opportunities. It seems like a lot of money up front, but not wanting to wait for the return on investment. So something that I was talking to somebody about yesterday, this exact topic, which is, how do you sell the value of energy savings when it isn't for a long-term hold?
Okay, let me take the first one, which is the appraisal. I put in the chat a link to EEBA.org, and I think it's /academy, but you can go to EEBA, you can go to education, you go to academy, and I think you can go to the appraisal section. And there literally is specific language that you need to put into your documentation that requires the banks to have a competent green appraisal done on your property. And if they're not, and there's green appraiser certification out there. And Teresa Lopez, Green Energy Money, she was our speaker, our guest speaker. I really encourage you, take a quick look. There's 2 webinars from an appraiser and the banking industry talking about how they're getting the correct appraisals that include the true value of solar, the true value of batteries, the true value of really great insulation and those things. So I'd encourage you to watch that. And I think that'll give you a really good strategy moving forward. Teresa's number is in there too, and she'll help you out. I know she gave us a different appraiser for here in Minneapolis. So that'll help. Your second question is an interesting one. I mean, I think, the commercial industry is somewhat ahead of the residential. And the truth is, Jennifer, it was probably 15 or 20 years ahead, to be honest. Multifamily falls somewhere in the middle of that. So I think you could see some additional demand from ESG, net zero, HERS zero perspective from institutional. But let's back up in the question, right? So even if you're going to flip a building, you have to stabilize the building, and it's all based on the cap rate of your building, right? So if you're able, let's just take a number, but if you're able to charge $1,500 for rent, if you build a building that the utilities, and I'm talking full utilities, are $37 a month for that unit. If your rent includes the utilities, so a lot of, I think, multifamily folks are looking at this and saying, the perceived value of utilities is $200 a month, $250 a month. If I just charge utilities through, it's just an expense and a refund. But perhaps it's better to have a more competitive building that's $1,500 a month and includes all of the utilities. So that extra money would flow to your profit line of the multifamily project, and it would show up in a lower cap rate for that project because it's a more profitable. It's all based on occupancy and profitability, even when you go to flip it. So I think that was the big aha moment for my builder developer team of seeing, wow, we just got a better cap rate building. But then perhaps the longer leap of it, Jennifer, is that who's going to buy your building at the end of the day? Most big apartment buildings, and maybe it's not the small size, right? I mean, institutional capital typically wants stabilized units, and maybe over 100 units, but they have an ESG requirement at institutional pension capital. So I think you're much more likely to get a lower cap rate by having a very efficient building. And by the way, along the way, you're receiving all the old rebate for 45L for multifamily. And that was really Energy Star level. It was $2,000 a unit. Today, it's going to go to $2,500, $5,000 if you use prevailing wage. And there's significant other rebates for doing this where I don't know that it's that much more. And I think it shows up in your cap table later on, even if you flip it after it's stabilized. You can't flip the building till it's stabilized anyway, right?
Right. Exactly.
That was long answers to two questions, but hopefully that hit it for you.
No, I mean, yeah, those are big questions. They need long answers. And although I think that still, I think there's a lot of caveats in that. So definitely has to be studied. Thank you, Andrew, for the question. All right. So I have a final question. What are you most excited about? Like what maybe something you installed in your house, some incredible innovation, maybe even talking to a manufacturer who's about to bust a move on a new product development or doing some R&D work, any sort of design process, construction process. Want to hear what's in the future. What do you see? What's in the crystal ball, and how is it going to be super cool for better housing construction?
Yeah, I'm going to go with that. I think that there's a new technology out there called V2G, and what it stands for is vehicle to grid. And I think that this is the biggest game changer that we've seen in the potential to have a house be completely resilient for the homeowner for 3 to 10 days. And what I mean by that is there's the ability, I think you're going to see some standard panels, maybe not standard, but there's some new panels coming into the marketplace that allow for vehicle to grid. There are new vehicles. I mean, I think most of the Fords, most of the GMs, most of the Nissan EVs, and then what is it? Hyundai and Kia, which I swear are the same car, just rebranded 2 different ways. But they're going to have this vehicle to grid component. So today, if you want your solar on your apartments or on your home to run when the power goes out, it's not necessarily possible. I mean, you can use a smart inverter that could do the shutdown. Anyway, in the short-term future, I think you've got this ability for the vehicle parked in your garage, which is the best battery you can get. And it's an upgraded battery every 3 or 5 or 10 years when you upgrade your car. Having the ability to power your house during an outage, to shut off at the panel in a smart way when it loses line power from the grid, and to operate everything within that house. And it almost creates, Jennifer, this like a survivability. And we've had some cases where, you know, our neighborhood went down, and everybody knows that I've got a 131 kilowatt hour mobile battery in my garage. And people start coming over. Oh, can you bring your, and it's a big mobile battery too, but can you bring your truck over? I have to save my freezer. I have to save my refrigerator. So I think it really is going to add to the resilience, to the survivability within the home. And I think vehicle to grid is really a game changer for how we think about communities and electrification and resiliency across. So that's my one answer.
Yeah, so you cracked my mind open. So I'm just thinking about, like, you know, there is a lot of potential for that, but then a lot of things have to be put in place for that to be functional in terms of how the grid supports it and all of those things. And I think that's going to be different on a geographical basis for sure. Any quick thoughts on that?
Well, I would keep it at, you know, there's a great thing in Stoicism that says, what can I control and what can I not control? I can't control the larger grid, but I can control my own microgrid at my house. And I think you've got the ability to, you know, use the Inflation Reduction Act to upgrade your wiring, to upgrade your panel in your house. I don't think we're that far away, Jennifer, from pretty much everyone in the world needing a 200 amp minimum panel in their house. So you've got the ability to do some of those upgrades. There's some great new panels coming out that when you upgrade your panel, it will allow for this at the local level. And just one of my pet peeves has been, why can't I use my solar when the power's out?
Yeah.
It was
Awesome.
crazy.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your time, Aaron. You're such a great leader in this space, and it's just a privilege to have you here and share your knowledge. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And if you're interested in this topic and you're interested in learning more about what the rebates are and how they're available to you, we have another webinar that will be hosted by us on April 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Rocky Mountain Institute Carbon Buildings Principal Lucas Toffoli will be presenting along with our team, and we've got also a product launch that will help you get those rebates quickly and easily. So anyway, thank you again, Aaron. Absolutely a pleasure, and thanks for, yes, and there's one more question. The recording, it has been recorded and it will be emailed out to everyone who registered for the session. So thanks again.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Bye.